Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the #C Arthritis event here at the Canadian Rheumatology Association and Arthritis Health Professionals Association annual scientific meeting. We're really happy to start our day with Dr. John Esdaile, who needs no introduction, but I feel I have to give you some introduction. John is the scientific director of Arthritis Research Canada. He's a professor of medicine at the University of British Columbia. He was a two-time division head there of rheumatology, has trained, a gazillion youngsters in the community, and one of them just received a huge award last night. We interviewed Dr. Lakai, I think, the day before. So that was really exciting to see her get her award. But we're really happy to have you in the studio this morning, John, because just following this interview, we're going to race to a workshop that we're going to deliver along with Dr. Sasha Vernadsky on biosimilars and how to have a positive conversation with your patients, rheumatology patients, when transitioning to a biosimilar. So bit of a controversial topic, but tons of evidence in now, and actually policy being enacted by private payers at the very least. And that's one of the reasons we proposed this workshop, because if it's happening, patients and physicians need to be well prepared. So that's basically the nutshell of our workshop. But I thought we'd start by asking you to tell us in a minute or two what's new and exciting at Arthritis Research Canada.
Lots is happening, and as you said, Deanne Lakai won the Distinguished Investigator, was awarded it last evening. There will be new people joining Arthritis Research Canada, and that's going to be probably in the summer, which will be really great.
Where you make new appointments.
We're going to make new faculty appointment, a new faculty appointment, which is always exciting for us to add someone to the team. We're now about 120 people working on almost every possible topic related to arthritis.
Yeah, so right from clinical research all the way to social science and health economics. I mean, you really, ARC, that's the affectionate acronym for Arthritis Research Canada, ARC. You really are sort of end-to-end in terms of your research scope.
We're doing translational research, so there's someone like Paul Fortin who's looking at a totally new antibody in lupus that we think is very exciting, and he has funding for that.
Great, terrific. So congratulations. ARC founded in 2000, and about the same time that ACE founded. You're our scientific partner and reviewer of all of our materials, so we want to thank you for that. It's invaluable, the volunteer service that all of your scientists give to ACE. We're very, very appreciative. So let's talk about our workshop. So you're going to kick things off by talking about giving a little 101 on biosimilars, but most importantly, we're going to talk about the evidence that supports transition, if in fact it's a policy transition or any other type of transition, and what we hope to accomplish in our workshop.
Do all of your listeners know what a biosimilar is?
I don't know, but you're going to tell them right now. Good segue for yourself, Dr. Esdaile.
So the big advance of the last 20 years has been the development of biologic drugs. They're drugs that have a powerful influence, particularly on inflammatory arthritis, so rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, spondylitis, and even things like lupus. They are huge molecules. So an aspirin is about a weight of 180, and the weight of a biologic antibody is about 150,000. Very complicated molecules. They've been under patent. The patent is starting to expire on some of them, and companies have prepared what are called biosimilars.
Which are still biologics, they're just a similar version.
They're extremely biosimilar, and they're genetically identical, and they've been approved by governments such as Health Canada, the Food and Drug Administration in the US, the European Medicines Agency in Europe, as being as safe as and as effective as the originator. And the advantage to the economy is they're half the price. So that there is one company now, one private insurer, who has been trying out switching people, where you prefer the word transition, to the biosimilars, and they're going to expand this program, and I suspect likely other private insurers are going
Will
to.
follow, yeah. So I think the underscore for patients like me, who's on one and likely will be transitioned relatively soon, is the safety and efficacy part. So you as, I believe that most rheumatologists understand that their clinical application is pretty much the same. Some of them have the same indications, a couple of them don't. But on the whole, people see no difference, but it's how you talk about them. So the results, the hard clinical outcomes, as I understand the
Right.
literature, are the same, but if you use a word like copy or something slightly pejorative in your language, patients don't. Some patients, a small percentage of them, report they don't feel as well. Yet when you look at them and do the joint counts and you look at their lab tests, they're doing as well as they were on their originator. So can you talk a little bit about what is being referred to and is referred to scientifically as the nocebo effect?
Well, we all know what the placebo effect is.
Right.
And the placebo effect is really easy. You take something that is inactive and you feel better. And perhaps,
Because you think it's better. Your expectation is you're going to get better.
well, it probably does change things. So taking an inactive substance may be therapeutic, is my belief.
Okay.
And, but it doesn't really matter. You're taking something like glucosamine, which is inactive, and 60% of people with knee osteoarthritis feel better 6 months later. Unfortunately, 60% who take the placebo feel better. Unfortunately, more than 60% who take an active drug feel better.
Right.
So that's the placebo effect.
Right.
It's very powerful, and I think doctors use it. They will say to a patient, well, I'm starting you on this new medication, which really helps 70, 80% of people, and that's a positive effect for the patient. So most prescriptions probably include a little placebo effect. So the nocebo effect is really just the reverse.
Yeah.
That if, say, the doctor or the pharmacist says, well, maybe this drug isn't as good, and creates doubts, then yes, the drug may not work as well, not because it doesn't work as well, but is a sort of a reverse of the placebo effect. When in fact, so the drugs really, for all intents and purposes, are identical. Their effects and their safety are identical.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've done some work with Dr. Susan Bartlett, who's one of a handful of clinical psychologists who works in the area of arthritis. And she sees patients, and she talks about this thing where if you don't address patients' concerns or fears in that clinical conversation in a positive way, then they will leave having an expectation that they're not going to do as well.
Yeah.
So basically that's what creates this nocebo effect. So why has a private payer and why more are looking seriously at transitioning patients, and I suppose governments will as well, why are they contemplating this? What benefits will it bring about? Not just continued care, quality of care for patients, but what other benefits will there be? Potentially.
So there's a financial benefit, obviously. The biosimilars are about half price. Many governments, and it varies province by province, are picking up some of the tab for drugs. In the province I'm from, British Columbia, they're picking up a huge amount of the tab for almost every patient, for every patient. Those budgets are very strained. They're way over budget. So anything that relieves those budgets is going to allow us to look at new drugs. As you know well, you've been a leader in getting people in government to agree to approve drugs for use in individuals with arthritis, and there are new ones always coming out. They are going to be expensive, and we're going to need the funding for them. And I know a point that you're particularly interested in is whether there can be some relaxation in access to some of these drugs. And again, those rules of access vary province to province, but they might allow a little leeway there. And each province also has very different rules on access to things like nursing or physiotherapy, occupational therapy. In BC, all of the rheumatologists are provided nurses, but there's very limited access to physiotherapy. So there may be a little money that could be put into that, and I know in British Columbia the government has been talking of doing things like that.
Yeah, I think, we had Andre Picard actually kick off this meeting this year. And it was really interesting because he talked about all these reports that have been generated. I'm sure you've read every one top to bottom. But they don't offer solutions. And I think one of the things that some of the patient organizations in Canada, certainly Arthritis Research Canada and others, have done is try to point the way for government and for private payers to say, how do you actually improve not just the medication, the medicine chest, so to speak, but also all these other parts of our healthcare that really matter to patients. When I was diagnosed with RA 30 years ago, I would have loved to have had access to a physiotherapist and an occupational therapist right away. I sat on a list for about 6 or 7 months and basically solved most of my own problems by the time I got pulled into the clinic. So when you think about like energizing that funding to provide those services earlier, when and where people need them, you can see the societal benefit to transitioning. So we're kind of excited about the workshop. We know it's a challenging topic for people, but at the end of the day, we know the experience in Europe has been on the whole very, very positive, and has saved billions of dollars, basically. Hundreds of millions at the very least.
No, the estimate is that by January 2020, Europe will have saved between 11 and 33 billion euros, so about 15 to, say, 40 odd billion US dollars. So you can do the math, add another third.
So I undershot the dollar runway there by a lot.
I mean, their savings using biosimilars is just beyond imagination. Had we been on the European schedule in Canada with access the way they've had in Europe, the healthcare system would have $2 billion.
Yeah,
that we don't have.
Yeah, that's a lot of bees.
That's a lot of bees.
Yeah. Well, we can't thank you enough. I know that we do have to rush off and go deliver our workshop with Dr. Bernatsky, so we really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Dr. Esdaile, and we wish ARC all the success in the world, and we again thank you for your huge scientific leadership in our community, and you've always been so willing to partner with patients, not just ACE, but the Canadian Spondylitis Association, the Arthritis Patient Advisory Board, which is resident in your own organization. We're really grateful that your scientists welcome us with open arms into their projects as advisors, as partners. It's really been a lot of fun over 20 years. So thank you so much. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Any questions, Anita?
There were two.
Oh.
Will the transition, like for a patient who's worried that the transition will take a lot of time or smooth, like will it be smooth or will it be fast?
I think it's going to be very smooth.
Yeah.
We've certainly, that's one of the reasons we're having the workshop today, is just to talk about how it's going to be operationalized. But again, I'm from British Columbia. We've had extensive talks with the government. We're going to be allowed extra visits. We're going to have nursing visits so that we really can bring the patient up to speed on what's happening and why. And I have been transitioning patients. I have had zero problems. Patients are very understanding about why this is happening. So I think while nothing will be 100%, I'm hoping it's going to be 99.5%.
Yeah.
And finally, where can people find more information about biosimilars?
Oh, that's great. So we have created a section on our website. I believe most patient organizations have some information. I think ours is probably one of the more robust areas. We've been involved in consultations with Health Canada and provincial governments for quite a few years now. If you go to www.jointhealth.org, there's a section on our website called the Biosim Exchange, and it's evidence-based information vetted by Arthritis Research Canada, and it reviews provincial policies, talks about the private payer policies, and you can find everything you need to know, as well as really patient-friendly videos there. So if you prefer simply to watch a video rather than read, you can. As well, there's a course now on our joint health education area of our website that takes you through those series of videos and offers some written information. So lots of information there. You can always contact us or one of the other patient organizations or ARC. And in closing, I think one thing we should say is we're trying to do this work to be ahead of the game, right? So far, one private payer has done it, and they've done it successfully and saved employer-provided plans a lot of money. And one thing that's really key, 60% of people like me are covered by private insurance. And a lot of them have lifetime limits. Mm-hmm. So if you can get something that does the exact same thing at half the price, saves your employer-sponsored plan a lot of money, there is a really good chance that your lifetime limit it continues a bit further. These are all really important issues for patients that don't really get discussed by the media necessarily, but important to our viewers. So that's I think that's a good place to go for information. You can also go to government websites. Health Canada has a superb section on biosimilars. So if you want to hear it straight from our regulator, you can go to the Health Canada website. So if you Google Health Canada and biosimilars, you'll find your way directly to that area. Great. Is that it? Okay. We want to thank you again. Have a good morning, everyone. We'll see you back here.